The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Alliance fell silent as Fleet Commander Gray entered. His footsteps echoed against the polished stone floors, and the scars on his face seemed deeper under the bright lights. 23 council members watched from their elevated seats as the decorated veteran made his way to the center of the room. Gray's silver uniform still bore the dust from his reconnaissance mission. He hadn't even taken time to clean up, not when his warning was so urgent. Looking up at the stern faces of the council members, he knew they wouldn't believe him. But he had to try. "Honorable Council," he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "I returned from Earth with grave news. The humans are not what we thought they were." High Counselor Reed leaned forward, his blue scales shimmering. "Commander Gray, you were tasked with observing a primitive species that has barely achieved spaceflight. What could possibly concern you?" Gray activated his holographic projector. Images of Earth's conflicts filled the air around him. Tanks rolling across deserts, ships sailing vast oceans, aircraft dropping from the sky. In the past 100 years, they fought 2 planet-wide wars. They went from simple flying machines to space vessels in less than 7 decades. Their rate of advancement is unprecedented. Many species advance quickly once they discover basic physics, another council member said dismissively. "This is hardly cause for alarm." Gray shook his head. "It's not just their speed of advancement, it's how they fight." He switched to different footage. "Look at their tactics. When they can't win with technology, they adapt. When they can't adapt, they improvise. And when they can't improvise, they simply refuse to lose." The images showed human soldiers fighting in frozen mountains, dense jungles, and empty deserts. They showed small groups defeating larger forces through clever tricks and unexpected strategies. They showed defeated armies rising again with new weapons and new tactics. "They have no unified government," Gray continued. "They fight among themselves constantly. But this has only made them stronger. Each conflict teaches them new ways to wage war. Each defeat makes them more determined. They don't follow the rules of engagement we consider universal." High Counselor Reed waved his hand dismissively. "Commander, you're speaking of a species that still fights with chemical projectiles. They haven't even developed basic energy weapons." "That's exactly my point," Gray insisted. "Look what they accomplish with simple tools. Imagine what they'll do with advanced technology. They don't think like us. They don't solve problems like us. Where we see limitations, they see challenges. Where we see impossibilities, they see opportunities." The council chambers erupted in murmurs. Gray pressed on, knowing his time was running out. "They have a saying, 'Necessity is the mother of invention.' When they need something badly enough, they find a way to make it happen. They've split atoms, walked on their moon, and cured deadly diseases, all because someone told them it couldn't be done." "You suggest we should fear them?" a council member asked, amused. "I suggest we should respect them," Gray corrected. "And yes, perhaps fear them a little. Because if we make them our enemies, they won't fight by our rules. They won't stop when tradition says they should stop. They won't give up when logic says they should give up." The High Counselor stood, signaling the end of the presentation. "Thank you, Commander Gray. We will take your concerns under advisement. You are dismissed." Gray looked around the chamber one last time. He saw the same expressions he'd expected: dismissal, amusement, even pity. They thought he was overreacting. They thought his long years of service had made him paranoid. As he walked out of the chamber, he spoke one final time, his words echoing in the vast space. "You think I'm afraid of their weapons? Their ships? Their armies? No. I'm afraid of their determination. I'm afraid of their creativity. But most of all, I'm afraid of what will happen when they realize how much stronger they are than we think they are." The doors closed behind him with a heavy thud, leaving the council to their discussions. In the years to come, they would remember this day. They would remember his warning. But by then, it would be far too late. 5 years had passed since Gray's warning, and he watched the news feeds from his small apartment on the outer rings of the Alliance capital. His retirement hadn't been by choice. The Council had politely suggested he take an early leave after his alarmist presentation. Now, he observed as they did exactly what he had feared they would do. The massive view screen showed the historic moment. The first official contact between the Galactic Alliance and Earth. A sleek Alliance diplomatic vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing in a place called Geneva. Thousands of humans gathered to witness the event, their faces filled with wonder and excitement. Gray poured himself a drink, his scared hands steady despite his anxiety. The humans had cleaned up well for the occasion. Their leaders wore formal attire, their military stood at attention in pressed uniforms, and their cities sparkled in the sunlight. They looked peaceful, eager, ready to join the galactic community. "They're playing smart," he muttered to himself, showing exactly what the Council wants to see. The Alliance delegation emerged from their ship, led by High Counselor Reed himself. The human leaders stepped forward, and the two species met in the middle. It was a picture-perfect moment, one that would be recorded in history books across 1,000 worlds. Gray's communication device buzzed. It was his old friend Tom, a fellow retired commander who had taken his warnings seriously. "Are you watching this circus?" Tom's voice crackled through the speaker. "Every moment," Gray replied. "They're already making the first mistake." On the screen, Reed was announcing the Alliance's generous offer of technological assistance. The humans would receive carefully controlled access to Alliance technology, allowing them to advance at a safe and monitored pace. The human leaders smiled and nodded, accepting these terms with apparent gratitude. "Look at their eyes," Gray said to Tom. "Not their smiles. Their eyes." The camera zoomed in on the human delegation. Behind their diplomatic expressions, their eyes were sharp, analyzing, calculating. One of their military officers was studying the Alliance ship with an intensity that made Gray's scales tingle. Over the next few hours, the humans gave their visitors a tour of their achievements. They showed their primitive space stations, their basic fusion reactors, their early attempts at faster-than-light travel. The Alliance delegation nodded politely, clearly seeing only the crude technology. "They're missing it completely," Gray said. "Look how quickly they built all this. Look how many different approaches they're trying at once. They're not showing us their failures. They're showing us their determination." In the following weeks, the Alliance began establishing their presence on Earth. They built a grand embassy, set up educational centers, and began the careful process of introducing advanced technology. The Council congratulated themselves on their wise and measured approach. But Gray noticed things that others missed. He saw how human scientists asked questions that probed at the fundamentals of Alliance technology. He noticed how their engineers studied every piece of equipment they were given, taking them apart and rebuilding them in new ways. Most importantly, he saw how they shared everything they learned, spreading knowledge across their planet at an incredible speed. "They're not just learning the technology," he recorded in his personal log. "They're understanding it, improving it. 6 months after we gave them basic shield technology, they've already developed variations we never considered. They're not following our path of advancement. They're creating their own." As Gray made his final log entry that night, he looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was already expanding, already growing stronger. The Alliance thought they were nurturing a child race, but Gray knew better. They weren't raising a child. They were awakening a giant. "The Council thinks they're being generous," he whispered to the night sky. "They don't realize they're handing weapons to future warriors. And when the humans finally show their true strength, we will remember this as the moment we sealed our fate." The trouble began with something small, as trouble often does. A trade dispute between Earth's outer colonies and the Centauri mining fleet sparked the first signs of what was to come. Gray watched the situation unfold from his favorite observation deck in the retirement complex, where the stars stretched out before him like scattered diamonds. The humans had established their first colonies with surprising speed, using modified Alliance technology to make harsh planets livable. The Centauri, longtime members of the Alliance, objected to humans mining in what they considered their territory. It should have been a simple matter to resolve. The Alliance Council sent their usual diplomatic team, expecting the humans to back down when faced with the Centauri's superior position and centuries of precedent. Instead, the human representatives arrived with stacks of data, alternative proposals, and a stubbornness that surprised everyone except Gray. "They're not going to bend," Gray told Tom over their evening call. "The Council doesn't understand. Those colonies represent humanity's first steps into space. They won't give them up." The Centauri responded by blockading the human colonies. It was a standard Alliance tactic, one that had resolved dozens of similar disputes in the past. The Council expected the humans to negotiate once their supply lines were cut. They didn't expect what happened next. The humans unveiled ships that shouldn't have existed. The vessels looked like Alliance designs on the surface, but they moved differently. They were faster, more maneuverable, and equipped with hybrid technology that combined Alliance principles with human innovations. "Impossible," the Council declared when they saw the footage. "They couldn't have developed these advances so quickly. They must have stolen classified technology." Gray knew better. He had been collecting reports, watching the patterns. "They didn't steal anything," he wrote in his log. "They took what we gave them and made it better. Where we saw finished products, they saw starting points. Where we followed established designs, they asked what if." The Alliance imposed sanctions on Earth, demanding they cease using unauthorized modifications to Alliance technology. The humans responded by revealing even more innovations. Their ships now carried shields that could adapt to different types of weapons. Their engines used principles that Alliance scientists had deemed theoretically impossible. "Look at these readings," Tom said, sending Gray the latest data. "They found ways to combine technologies we've always kept separate. They're not just copying our work, they're reimagining it." The Centauri blockade faced a new problem. Their sensors couldn't reliably track the human ships. The vessels would appear in one place, then seem to jump in ways that defied standard detection methods. When confronted, the humans simply said they had improved the cloaking technology they had been given. Gray received a message from an old colleague still serving on the Council. "How did you know?" The message read, "How did you know they would do this?" "Because I watched them," Gray replied. "I saw how they fight their wars. They don't just use their weapons, they constantly improve them. They don't just face their enemies, they study them. Every conflict makes them stronger." The situation reached its breaking point when human ships began slipping through the blockade using techniques that left the Centauri fleet confused and disorganized. The Council demanded Earth's government explain how they had developed such capabilities. The human representative's response sent chills through the Council chamber. "You gave us the keys to the stars, but you never said we couldn't make better locks." That evening, Gray updated his personal log one last time. The Council thought they could control human advancement by carefully measuring what technology they shared. They didn't realize that to humans, every piece of technology is a puzzle to be taken apart, studied, and rebuilt. They didn't understand that humans don't just use tools, they master them, improve them, and imagine new ways to use them. The storm is coming, and we handed them the winds. The attack came at dawn, though in space, dawn was just another word. The human fleet struck the Centauri blockade with a precision that shocked the Alliance observers. Their ships moved in patterns never seen before, breaking every rule of space combat that the Alliance had established over centuries. Gray watched the battle feeds from the emergency council chamber, where he had been summoned as an advisor. The council members who had once dismissed his warnings now hung on his every word as he explained what they were seeing. "They're not following any standard combat doctrine," he said, pointing to the tactical display. "Look at how their smaller ships dart between our larger vessels. They're using our own ships as shields against their companions' fire." The human ships seemed to be everywhere at once. They had taken the Alliance's basic technology and transformed it into something new. Their vessels could make micro-jumps through space, appearing and disappearing in ways that confused the Centauri targeting systems. Impossible, one council member whispered. Those maneuvers should tear their ships apart. They found a way. Gray replied simply. They always find a way. The real surprise came when the humans revealed their hidden fleet. As the Centauri forces focused on the visible threat, hundreds of ships emerged from behind Earth's moon. They had been there all along, hidden by technology that should not have existed. The council chamber erupted in chaos. How long have they been building these ships? Someone demanded. How did we not see this? Gray watched as the human fleet executed their trap perfectly. The Centauri ships, caught between two forces, tried to retreat, but the humans had studied Alliance tactics too well. They knew exactly where the Centauri would try to regroup. You don't understand, Gray said, his voice cutting through the panic. These aren't just ships they built in secret. These are ships they built to counter our every strategy. They've been watching us, learning from us, and preparing for this moment. The battle was over in hours. The mighty Centauri blockade, with ships that had patrolled space for centuries, found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. The human vessels didn't just win. They did it without destroying a single Centauri ship. Instead, they disabled the enemy vessels with precise strikes to their engines and weapon systems. It was a display of power that sent a clear message. They could have destroyed them all, but chose not to. Send me to talk to them, Gray suggested to the council. I understand how they think. Maybe I can. A new alert cut him off. Reports were coming in from across Alliance space. Human ships had been spotted near major trade routes, key military installations, and vital resource centers. They had not just been building a fleet. They had been positioning it. We gave them maps of our territory, a council member realized aloud. We showed them all our important locations. And they studied every one of them, Gray added, not as tourists or traders, but as tacticians. Every piece of information we shared became part of their strategy. The council received a transmission from Earth's military command. The message was simple. The blockade has been lifted. We are open to discussions about new trade agreements. We expect these talks to be between equals. Gray looked at the faces around him, the same faces that had dismissed his warnings years ago. Now they understood what he had seen in humanity from the start. It wasn't just their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to take every challenge and turn it into an advantage. What do we do now? High Counselor Reed asked, looking older than Gray had ever seen him. Now, Gray replied, watching the tactical display as human ships took up protective positions around their disabled opponents. Now we learn what it means to have humans as neighbors instead of subjects, and we pray they're more forgiving than we were wise. The Alliance attack fleet jumped into Earth's solar system with enough firepower to destroy 3 planets. 6,000 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Their orders were simple: show humanity the price of defiance. Gray stood on the observation deck of the Council's Emergency Command Center, watching the tactical displays with a heavy heart. He had warned them all those years ago, but even he hadn't expected the Council to react with such fear and anger. Full attack formation, High Counselor Reed commanded. We'll show them what real military power looks like. The Alliance fleet moved forward, their weapons charged. But something was wrong. The human defense fleet wasn't retreating. They weren't even moving into defensive positions. Instead, their ships were spreading out, moving between the asteroids that filled the space between Mars and Jupiter. They're hiding in the asteroid field, an Alliance commander reported with satisfaction. Fear has finally taught them wisdom. Gray knew better. No, he said quietly. They're not hiding. They're hunting. The first strike came from the asteroids themselves. Hundreds of them suddenly changed course, revealing hidden engines. The Alliance fleet, scattered as chunks of space rock, the size of mountains, came hurtling toward them. Their formation broke apart. Impossible, Reed shouted. They turned asteroids into weapons. They turned everything into weapons, Gray corrected. Look closer. The humans had done more than attach engines to asteroids. They had hollowed some out into hangars. Others contained weapon systems. Each piece of space debris became a fortress, a weapon, or a trap. The Alliance fleet found itself fighting an enemy that used the very environment of space against them. Small human ships darted between the rocks, striking and vanishing before the Alliance vessels could lock weapons. Larger human vessels used the asteroids as shields, their improved weapons punching through the space rocks to hit Alliance ships on the other side. Standard formation is useless, an Alliance commander reported. We can't predict their attack patterns. Gray watched as the mighty Alliance fleet was pulled apart piece by piece. When they gathered in large groups, the humans used their modified asteroids as weapons. When they spread out, the human ships picked them off one by one. We've lost contact with Battle Group 7. Someone reported. Battle Group 3 is under heavy fire. Battle Group 10 reports their weapons are ineffective against the new human shields. The Alliance commanders tried every tactic in their military doctrine. They attempted to surround the asteroid field. The humans responded by revealing ships hidden on the dark side of Mars. They tried to target the human command ships. The humans showed that every ship in their fleet could act independently, continuing to fight effectively even when cut off from command. 3 days into the battle, the Alliance had lost a third of their fleet. Not all ships were destroyed. Many were simply disabled, their crews evacuated by the humans before the vessels were captured intact. Do you understand now? Gray asked the council members who watched with him. Every ship they capture is one they'll study. Every tactic we use is one they'll learn to counter. They don't just fight. They adapt. They evolve. A new report came in. The humans had begun manufacturing ships right in the middle of the battle, using captured Alliance vessels as raw materials. They were learning, improving, and building at a pace that defied comprehension. Send the withdrawal signal, Reed finally ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. All ships are to retreat to defensive positions around our core worlds. As the mighty Alliance fleet limped away from Earth, Gray made one final observation in his personal log. We came to crush them with overwhelming force. Instead, they showed us that force means nothing against an enemy who turns your own strength against you. We thought numbers would win the day. They showed us that innovation and adaptation are the true weapons of war. The galaxy will never be the same. 2 weeks after the failed attack on Earth, Gray found himself standing before the Alliance Council again. This time, there were no dismissive looks or condescending smiles. The mighty chamber felt smaller now, darker, as reports of human advances flooded in from across Alliance space. They've taken 3 more systems since yesterday, Reed announced, his scales dull with exhaustion. Every defense we create, they break within days. Every weapon we deploy, they turn against us. Commander Gray, we need your insight. How do they do it? Gray looked at the tactical display floating in the center of the chamber. Human ships were spreading through Alliance space like a steadily growing wave. But they weren't destroying worlds or crushing resistance. Instead, they were disabling ships, capturing stations, and offering surrendering forces a chance to join them. You still don't understand what makes them different, Gray said, walking to the display. Look at this capture footage. Every time we lose a ship, they don't just take it. They study it. They take it apart. Within hours, they understand how it works. Within days, they've made it better. The council watched as Gray played a series of recordings. Human engineers swarming over captured Alliance vessels. Their ships adapting mid-battle to new Alliance weapons. Their tactics changing and evolving with each engagement. We fight to win, Gray explained. They fight to learn. Every battle makes them stronger. Every defeat teaches them something new. They don't just want victory. They want understanding. A new alert flashed across the display. The humans had broken through another defense line. But again, they had disabled rather than destroyed their opponents. The council members shifted uneasily in their seats. Why do they show such restraint? One member asked. They could destroy us, yet they hold back. Why? Gray smiled for the first time in weeks. Because they're not like us. When we saw them as primitive, we planned to keep them that way. When we saw them as a threat, we tried to destroy them. But when they see us as enemies, they see an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become something more. The chamber doors opened, and a junior officer rushed in. New reports from the frontier. The humans. They're not just capturing our ships anymore. They're improving them. Then they're giving them back to our crews who surrendered. They're teaching our people how to use the improvements. The council erupted in confused discussion. This defied every rule of warfare they knew. Enemies didn't share advances with their opponents. They didn't teach their captives. They didn't turn defeats into opportunities for cooperation. Commander Gray, Reed said, his voice cutting through the chaos. You warned us about them 5 years ago. You saw what we couldn't see. Tell us, what are they really fighting for? Gray walked to the window, looking out at the stars where human ships now flew freely among Alliance vessels. They're not fighting for territory or power. They're not even fighting for victory anymore. They're fighting for a future they've imagined. One where we rise together instead of falling apart. The tactical display updated again, showing more Alliance forces choosing to surrender, to learn, to adapt. The humans weren't just winning the war. They were changing the very nature of the conflict. We thought we were the teachers, Gray said softly. We thought we knew what advancement looked like. But they showed us that real progress isn't about having the best technology or the strongest weapons. It's about having the wisdom to know when to fight, when to learn, and when to grow together. The council chamber fell silent as the truth sank in. The humans hadn't just proved themselves superior in battle. They had proved themselves superior in vision. They fought not to conquer, but to elevate. Not to destroy, but to transform. Today's enemies, Gray concluded, might be tomorrow's greatest teachers, if we're wise enough to learn. The human fleet arrived at the Alliance capital world without firing a single shot. Their ships filled the sky like artificial stars, each one a testament to how far they had come from their first stumbling steps into space. Gray stood at the spaceport, watching as the human diplomatic vessel landed. 5 years had passed since his first warning to the council. Now, as he waited alongside the remaining council members, he couldn't help but appreciate the irony. They had feared humans would destroy them. Instead, humans had transformed them. The ship's doors opened with a soft hiss. The human delegation walked out, led by their admiral, a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind her came scientists, engineers, and diplomats, not conquerors. Welcome to the Alliance capital, Reed said, his voice carrying none of its old pride. We are prepared to discuss terms of surrender. The human admiral smiled. Surrender? No, High Counselor. We're here to discuss partnership. Gray watched as confusion spread across the council members' faces. The humans had pushed to the very heart of Alliance space. They had proven their superiority in every battle. Yet here they stood, offering friendship instead of demanding submission. In the great council chamber, the humans laid out their vision. They shared data tablets showing plans for joint research projects, combined fleet operations, and educational exchanges. They weren't interested in ruling the Alliance. They wanted to learn from it, grow with it. Your civilization has knowledge gathered over thousands of years, the Admiral explained. We have new ways of looking at old problems. Together, we could achieve things neither of us could manage alone. One of the council members spoke up. But why? After everything we did, trying to hold you back, then trying to destroy you, why offer partnership? The Admiral turned to Gray, surprising everyone. Because of him, she said. Years ago, Commander Gray warned you about us. He understood us better than anyone. But there was one thing even he didn't fully grasp. She activated a holographic display, showing Earth's history. Images of wars, disasters, and conflicts floated in the air. But after each darkness came scenes of rebuilding, of people helping each other, of progress rising from ruin. We don't just learn from victory, she continued. We learn from our mistakes, from our failures, from our darkest moments. Every time we faced extinction, we've come back stronger, not just through technology or tactics, but through cooperation, through understanding that we're stronger together than apart. Gray finally understood. You studied our history too, didn't you? Just as carefully as you studied our technology. The Admiral nodded. We saw an empire that had grown stagnant because it forgot how to adapt. We saw people so convinced of their superiority that they stopped trying to improve. We decided the real victory wouldn't be in conquering you, but in helping you remember how to grow. Over the next few hours, humans and Alliance members began working together. Engineers from both species excitedly shared ideas. Scientists compared notes on problems they'd been trying to solve. What had started as a war was transforming into something entirely new. Later that evening, Gray stood in his old spot on the observation deck. Below him, human and Alliance ships patrolled together. Engineers from both species were already working on combining their technologies in new ways. In the distance, he could see construction beginning on a joint research facility. You were right, the Admiral said, joining him at the window. We're not like you. But maybe that's exactly why we need each other. Gray looked at the stars, seeing them with new eyes. I warned them that humans would change everything, he said. I just didn't realize you would change us for the better. That's the thing about humans, she replied with a smile. We don't just want to reach the stars. We want to help everyone else reach them too. Because the universe is too big, too wonderful, for any species to explore it alone. As night fell on the Alliance capital, two civilizations that had started as enemies began working together to build something new. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, countless other worlds waited to be discovered by this new partnership of species who had learned that the greatest power wasn't in weapons or technology, but in the ability to grow, change, and rise together.